So now we're going to talk about linear regression, which is basically like a simple, I guess it is like a simple model almost of like where you give it inputs and then you give it outputs, right? So the classic, so yeah, we're going to talk about linear regression. And the difference between this linear regression and logistic regression is that logistic regression is for like classification, and it's like discrete data, whereas linear is kind of like it's continuous. And so, like a real world example would be, if you're predicting actual values like house prices or maybe temperature or stock trends. But yeah, so like a sample formula for linear regression could be like y equals x1 w1 plus x2 w2, etc. And then we add in a bias. And so as we mentioned previously in gradient descent, these w's and the bias we call our parameters. We call our model parameters. And so they basically, decide, given, specific inputs, how much weight do we give to those inputs in terms of predicting and getting our output, right? So, for example, let's say we're doing a height prediction model, right? What are the factors that go into your height? Well, it could be, your parents' height, your parents' height. It could be your maybe your grandparents' height. Let's just say that for now. Let's say your grandparents' height as well, right? So that means we have two parameters, W1 and we have W2, which is just each representing either grandparents or parents' height, right? And so we're going to give our model for any specific inputs, we're going to give it, a bunch of training data where we're going to give it these inputs and then we're going to constantly change these weights in order to get a more accurate output, right? And going back to the weights, how do we calculate those? Well, that goes back to gradient descent, right? So let's say for W1, here's how it would work. It would say W new equals W old minus learning rate times the error, the partial derivative of that weight, right? The error. And so does this look familiar? Yeah, this is the formula for gradient descent, which is how we update. As you can see, that's how we update our parameters, right? So I guess to conclude, linear regression is just a simple way of, a pretty simple model of just giving it an input into our linear regression model, and then we get, a continuous value maybe as our output, and then we can train it and improve it by using gradient descent.